Hello viewers, Super GT here. Now today's video features a race which has a pointless pit stop, quite interestingly. Now, we're going to dive into the very first race, and as you can see, we're going to be starting towards the back in the Atenza. Let's do a warm-up, shall we? The best warm-up of all time, as you can see there. Just go straight into the barrier. Now, okay, we're going to start off in the Mazda Atenza. As I said, this is my first race, so I don't know what is the best car. I'm diving into the unknown. But the Atenza was the top of the time trial leaderboard at least, so I know that. But it doesn't always mean it's the best in the race. Now, wind goes through, and he kind of gets spun by a gust of wind, loses control, and goes into barrier. So we're into, what, the first minute of the video, and we already have a barrier experience. Now, despite starting towards the back, normally when you start towards the back, you'd expect to move forwards quite quickly. But that was not the case in this race. In fact, at this point here, I've moved down a position, I've lost a position, and it was about to get a little bit worse, because through here I lost another one, and went down into 20th, dead last. Fantastic. Now, a couple of drivers went in, as you can see there, going in for their technically pointless pit stops. We'll explain why later. Now, I'll go into mine. Now, because I didn't know what I was doing, I actually changed my tyres, but it turns out you don't actually have to change your tyres, because there was no tyre requirements for this race. You could use the same set of tyres throughout, but you did have to do a pit stop. It was very weird. It was a very weird race. Now, I came back out in 20th. This gave me half the race to try to gain something to preserve some of my dignity. And we're up behind a couple of the Meganes here. Now, this seemed to be the car of choice for the race, as I am now finding out. And through this tight, twisty section here, I'll get a good exit. And we can pull to one side of this guy and go in between the two of them as the German there serves a penalty. Up the inside we go then. And back into 18th where we started. 17th by this point, as a couple of people going into the pit lane. Now, this Italian kind of decides that he doesn't really fancy going around that corner anymore, and decides to visit the barrier. So we gain one more position, and yet one more when someone else pitted. Now, there was a chance here to gain 14th position, which wouldn't have been too bad, I suppose. Still moving up 4 positions, that would have been. He covers the inside, so I try it around the outside with a nice late line. I've got the fresher tyres here, and then I try to stick my nose in a little bit too long, and I run slightly wide and lose crucial momentum, such that this Lamborghini managed to get the run and the momentum and get past. And, you know, I was punching myself in the face at this precise moment here, knowing that I probably should have backed out, and then I wouldn't have lost that position to the Lambo. But there you go, 16th position, up 2. It was a clean race, but that car was not quite the one we wanted. The Megane trophy is the one we want. Therefore, we are going to select it and head back in for race number 2. This time, once again, starting at the back, but trying to do a better job, because that last race was really... to put it positively, let's just say it was a learning experience, and we learned therefore to not use the Atenza and go with the Megane. Now, this car, why is it so much better? Well, really because of its handling capabilities. The Spaniard here leaves the door open, and I wasn't really planning on going for that move, but once the door is open so kindly and so far wide, then you really just got to go for it, you know. So, up a couple of positions there, we actually gained another one. Side by side here onto the awkward braking zone for this tight left. Now, the Spaniard obviously wasn't happy with that move, because he comes flying back across the grass, across the curb, and we get a rude shove and lose 2 positions as a result. So we gained 2, lost 2, not that great. Now, it's these very long corners, such as this one here. This track has 3 of these very long 180 degree corners, and this Megane really does chew them up, and it takes them very well. So therefore, this car is very strong around this track. It does lack straight line speed, but you do gain so much in the turns in this car. That's why it's very popular. Now through here, Wind and our Spanish friend there get very much acquainted with each other and the barrier. And this clears the way now to try to catch up with 14th. We have lost ground. We are out of the slipstream range. So we do have to put a bit of work in here to try to catch up with that group up in front. Now that long corner there, not quite the best line, but we get through there okay. Now the driver, the Austrian driver just behind here, perhaps could have got a run there. I'm trying to get my words out. And but this section here is a very fast flowing section. It really does require cooperation, and you don't really want to go through there side by side at all, because you can lose so much time if you do that. So quite sensibly he stays behind. We go through their single file, and then we can fight a little bit later on. A couple of drivers going to the pit lane at the end of the first lap. Now, as I said earlier, you did have to do a pit stop, but you didn't have to change your tyres. You didn't have to refuel because you had more than enough fuel to complete the race. Therefore, the pit stop was kind of pointless. There was no real tactical element to it, other than the only reason you'd go into the pit lane is to avoid traffic. So let's say you're stuck behind someone, you go into the pit lane. So I suppose there is a point, but really beyond that there isn't much point. We actually set the fastest lap there, so you could argue that you've been somewhat clickbaited, but you can still understand my point. That you go into the pit lane, you stop, do nothing, and then drive out. It's kind of a funky concept, if that's the correct way to put it. Now, by this point here, up behind the Subaru, caught him on lap 2 with the fastest lap. So we're going to try and look for a way through. And as was mentioned earlier, the Megane that I'm driving here is good around the corners, but it doesn't quite have the straight line speed, which can make overtaking quite tricky up against a car which has slightly better straight line speed. So you see they're catching up on the brakes, but it's going to be on the straight here where he just edges away there. So the Subaru with good acceleration, and it drives off that corner pretty well. By the end of lap 3, some more people going into the pit lane. Is the guy ahead going to go in? Yes, he is. I'm going to stay out. As I said, it doesn't really matter which lap you do it in, your pit stop. But the main consideration really is trying to consider the traffic. So if you're stuck behind someone, go in, and you also have to consider where you'll come back out, losing maybe 6 or 7 seconds to do the pit stop. So you have to kind of work out where you're going to come back out into the pack. So you obviously don't want to come back out right behind lots of people. So you've got to think about that. So by the end of lap 4, the latter stage of the 4th lap here, up into 5th position, really courtesy of most people having pitted by this point, but I decided to take my pit stop, this time not changing the tyres, not refueling. So what you're about to witness is very strange. The car stops, and really it's only the lollipop man who's earning his money there, as the rest just kind of stand about doing nothing. So I'm not really sure how that team can function when most of their staff are doing zero work, but there you go. So Wind gets through here, so we find ourselves now in 11th. Now you might have noticed I actually jumped ahead of the Finnish driver there, so he went and actually changed his tyres, which actually costs you maybe 1.5 to 2 seconds. So that's why I managed to jump from behind him to in front of him. So that's something to note. The driver behind has a tyre advantage. He has fresh tyres. But luckily for this race, the tyre wear wasn't too bad. The slider was set quite low. Therefore, you could realistically do the whole 8 laps on one set of tyres. You didn't really have to worry about that too much. My main consideration at this point of the race is trying to stay into the slipstream of Wind, the guy up in front, who clearly has some decent pace. Therefore, if I could just stay right behind him, I could perhaps just gain a little bit of time, even if it was for just a half a lap, because through here he got a really good exit. It was good through those hairpins, and he just slipped away out of the slipstream range. So the attention then turns to this Spaniard who has become acquainted with Barrier. So lots of visits to the Barry R during the course of this race. But we move up into 10th as a result of that. Started 17th, let's not forget. So we're getting 7 at this point. But I sense that from here to the end it might be something of a defensive race, because, well, the guy behind in slipstream range with fresh tyres, and then we had that Spaniard who was ahead now recovering from that crash. So he's going to be looking to try to gain a position or two. So up the hill, just trying to break the toe of the Subaru, which does have superior straight line speed compared to this Megane. So through here I take a really wide line, way too wide on the entry, and the finish driver actually gets very close. So that was way too wide, turned in far too late, and lost perhaps a couple of tenths through that corner. Now trying to break the toe once again. This section here crucial. Very easy to get this bit wrong because it's almost flat. I think you can take it flat if you're like world-class GOAT level, but I was opting for a hint of a lift halfway through just to settle the car down and get that line sorted out. Now through the final corner, lap number 7, end of the penultimate lap, crossing the line to begin lap number 8. ERT Chimpanzee just comes out just in front, and he's driving the Atenza, which is the car that I was in the first race, and it wasn't the car I was particularly fond of in that race, if I must be honest. So if he was having anything like the problems I was having, he may well be struggling with the tyres right now, and through there he just did not have the grip. The Atenza just nowhere near as good around the corners, and through here I'm going to force him narrow, go very wide and look for the outside overtake, and to my astonishment it actually worked out to perfection. So we move up into 9th, and I think this is about as good as it's going to get, because the guy in 8th is now 3.5 seconds ahead with only half a lap to go. So really from here now, just a case of trying to stay ahead of the 2 Finnish drivers just immediately behind me. So we could say Häkkinen and Raikkonen there, just logging on to play a bit of GT Sport in the F1 season downtime. And well, in fact, maybe Kimi Raikkonen would have been at the Turkish Grand Prix when I recorded this. So, well, you know, just logging on for a bit of fun, why not? So through this section, fast sweeping corners, and then you're coming into 2 very slow hairpins. So taking that actually pretty nicely, that fast sweeping chicane into the hairpin, getting on the power, and then this corner very deceiving because it's off camber on the way in. So it's very easy to overshoot and go wide. We cut back for a later apex though. Just trying to get a good exit up the hill, and then moving left to break the toe. But you see there, they're both going to follow me. But this is where it goes wrong for the pair of them, as I think Chimpanzee gets this corner wrong. The Atenza just not really all that good in the long sweeping corners, and therefore he dropped out slipstream range. Now it wasn't going to be a 9th position because the German in front did this. Accidentally pressed the shutdown button and killed his own race. So we stole 8th position just before the line. I mean, that is a killer. I mean, if I was punching myself in the face earlier, he's punching and kicking himself in the face. So we went up 9 positions there. Not too bad. I was actually pretty pleased with that race. The German who finished towards the front told me to do a quali lap, which is a good idea. So let's do that. Start towards the front. The Atenza, as I said, was apparently the car to use in qualifying. It just wasn't as good in the race. So by this point here, this is the 6th lap of qualifying. I was down in a couple of sectors there by a 10th in either sector. I still got my purple lap, but I knew because of my sector times and my optimum time that I could go into the 26s, a 2:26. So that lap there was a 2:27.1, and I knew that if I hooked it all up, I could definitely get well within the 2:26s, and that was my aim. So through here, carrying the speed nicely, using the grass on the entry over that curb. By this point here, near enough 2 tenths up, and this is where things go perhaps a little bit wrong because I go a little bit too wide there and I lose easily a tenth, maybe a bit more, and just through that one corner, quite annoyingly. It is a difficult lap to hook up. As you can see on the map, it's a very long lap, 2.5 minutes, lots of corners, therefore lots of possibilities to get something wrong. So the longer the lap, the more corners there are, the more likely you are to mess one corner up. But through here, good line on the exit. We are still just shy of 2/10 up, as you can see. But I knew I got this corner wrong and the last corner wrong on my best lap. So let's try and take this line a bit better, getting nice and close to the entry curb. And as you can see, we've gained perhaps 1/10.5 through there. But I knew that I took the final corner wrong on my best lap as well. So we can still gain a little bit more. Make sure we don't bottle this section, which is very easy to do, running a bit of the grass. So as long as you keep 2 on the curb, it's fine. I'm heading in nice and early into this corner, letting the car rotate mid-turn before getting back on the power as early as possible, seeing the car to the outside, and we gained about 1/10 for that final corner, as you can see. So 4.5 tenths, near enough of an improvement. That sees us get a 2:26.7, and I was pretty happy with that lap. Not too bad. We got ourselves a nice Alpine livery before jumping back into the race. Now that qualifying lap gave us a qualifying position of 3rd, so starting a lot further forward this time, and this gives us a solid chance to get on the podium, perhaps better, maybe win the race. So let's see what we can do from towards the front of the pack. So of course this is going to be very much a different type of race. When you start towards the front, you can easily pull away from the pack, and there's less fighting at the front. You know, the front guys tend to just pull away, work together, stretch out the pack, and do the fighting later on. When you start towards the back, obviously you have to do a lot more fighting, a lot more overtaking, and therefore you're going to get slowed down somewhat. It's a very different type of race, so you have to get yourself into the right frame of mind, knowing what type of race you're going to go into. And often, you know, when you're surrounded by the very fast guys here, as these 2 guys are, you do have to be very on it. You have to be kind of perfect in many ways, and make sure you don't make any glaring errors. So let's try to do an entire 8 laps here without any aforementioned glaring errors, and have a nice, lovely result at the end of it. So through the twisty section in the middle there, at the Kyoto, oh my god, I'm not even going to say it, Yamagiwa, is that how you say it? So of course it's kind of like 2 tracks combined into one long one, and it's the bits where the 2 tracks join, which is normally the very twisty bit, the very sharp hairpins. So I just lost slight touch with these 2 guys, but then coming down here you see the German just doesn't quite get the line right and actually loses a couple of tenths, so I go right onto the back of him, and that's so easy to do, that section. You really are threading the needle down there, so you have to be very, very precise indeed. So this gives me the chance and the opportunity to perhaps go for a move into turn 1, which is a very good overtaking place. I don't quite have enough slipstream. I am going to look for the move, going to look for the 100 board. I don't want to overshoot, and the German actually goes quite late on the brakes. I'm going to see it up the inside on the exit, but I knew it wasn't worth fighting there. The next corner is a right, therefore I was always going to lose out if I was on the left. So I might as well just back out, let him take the racing line, therefore we stay closer to the leader. If you're both going to fight, you're both going to lose time to the leader, so I think that was a sensible thing to do. Unfortunately this meant that we received some contact as I dropped back slightly, and Burrs goes through. I obviously felt some guilt with that, and decided to let us back through, so fair enough, good sportsmanship there, as he decides to back out, let us retake the position. The unfortunate downside of that was we now lose touch with the guy in second and actually lose the slipstream, so it's just an unfortunate series of events there at the beginning of lap 2. It's just these little things that can go against you, you know, that can decide the race ultimately, but you know, still a long way to go. The German once again struggling with that downhill sweeping series of corners, and this meant that I was able to get back into the slipstream area. The leader by this point 2 seconds ahead, and clearly in control of the race and looking nice and composed out in front. The German here not as composed, making a mistake into this section. We're going to draw side by side on the exit momentarily before he gets a good run on the exit and retakes his second. Now through here, I'm going to take a nice tight line. Really this is the area of the circuit that I've identified. Obviously he's clearly struggling with this downhill section, and therefore we're going to target a good run down here, trying to stay as close as possible, which might give us a chance into the final corner, if not the first corner of the next lap. So not quite close enough to go for the move here. The key really though is to stay close and get a good exit and go for the move possibly into turn 1. We've got a very good run this time, and we're just into the toe. He does not have the toe of the leader and therefore isn't quite as quick, so we're going to draw alongside into the braking zone, and we can firmly take the move up the inside and gain second. You notice now the leader actually has a penalty. This gives us a chance therefore to draw closer as he serves that penalty in a couple of corners time. So that was actually good timing on that overtake, I think, moving up into second and possibly getting a bit closer here. Now this penalty zone is one of the better ones. You can see the time here. It goes from 1.9 and eventually by the time we get into this corner it goes down to about 1.1. Now that isn't, or 1.0, that isn't actually such a bad penalty zone though. There are worse ones than that. But I have gained 7 or 8 tenths there. And this gives us the chance, if I can just gain a few more tenths, then this gives us the chance to draw back into the slipstream, which really does change the complexion of the race. Because if he can stay away from me now, then that's very, very good news for him. If I can get into the slipstream, it changes it completely. And it's these moments here that can change the race completely. And the race result can pivot on this next section of the race, should I say. Now on the exit, the thing I was dreading, I just got on the power a little bit too soon and draw slightly too wide into the barrier. So another barrier visit. He's a very popular guy today, and unfortunately the result of that was I lost maybe about 7 tenths, and the gap that we got back on the Norwegian driver, well, he just got back on me. So by the end of this lap he was actually 3 seconds ahead, goes in for his pit stop, and I thought it was maybe a bit too soon, but there does seem to be a gap and he actually drew into that gap. I keep saying drew and draw, I don't know why. But coming up here, I'm now in the lead, of course, courtesy of the leader, the Norwegian, taking his pit stop. And I wasn't able to pull away. I was pulling away after immediately overtaking the German, but then on this lap he just really just got good basically, and then managed to catch right back up. So as you can see on the radar, he's very, very close indeed. Now I just commit just a tiny bit too soon to that corner, go across the grass, and I'm pretty sure that's 4 wheels across the grass, which is going to mean a penalty. And there it is, a 0.5 second penalty. And just to rub salt in the wounds, dirty tyres meant I go slightly wide and he overtakes me. So double whammy there, bit unfortunate. Not going to change the tyres, not going to refuel. So Lollipop Man once again in meaningful employment, unlike the rest of his teammates there in the pit lane. But this puts us in 6th position now with a penalty to serve. So just a couple of little moments in this race and it's just going away from you. And as I said many times already, that when you're at the front of the pack, when you're at these battles towards the front, it really is the tiny things that will determine the race result. And therefore, that little penalty, a couple of little mistakes, and I could easily be in second, but look at that. Because of all these mistakes and the penalty, the German comes out from his pit stop in second, 2 seconds ahead, or 2.5 seconds ahead. And the main threat now really is behind, as Wind, who actually started towards the back, is flying through. He's got the fastest lap there, which is 1.3 seconds quicker than my fastest lap. So it just shows you how quick he is, and therefore his threat should be taken seriously, even if he was starting at the back. If there's a chance of catching second, then we'll go for it, but it doesn't really look possible because he's still 2.5 seconds ahead. This is the final lap now. It's very much a case of trying to stay in third, trying to preserve the podium and trying to preserve the position that we started in. Into the hairpin for the final time, keeping it nice and narrow. You can see Wind just drawing into, I said drawing again. If you want to watch this video again and do a drinking game for the word draw, drawing or drew, then you'll probably be dead by about the 3rd minute. Anyway, up the hill, not many corners remaining, not many chances left for Wind to try to draw alongside and get into 3rd position. Now through here, going into the downhill sequence, I do just protect the left-hand side, gives me a bit of a bump. Now I've just got to get this right, otherwise he's going to get through. And guess what? I don't quite get it right, just hit that curb at the wrong angle, have to stay on that curb. It goes up the inside, I'm going to go for the return move, and I actually quite bravely put it into the gap. And this gives me a shot coming up the final corner. It's going to be a drag race between the two of us, but he just gets the momentum a tiny bit earlier on the power, and he just takes 3rd. It was a shame that the race finished that way, but it was a really fun race and I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. Do give us a sub if you enjoyed it, and drop a like. But do have a nice day. I'll catch you around in the next video. Goodbye.